Josh, thanks for coming on the podcast, my friend.
Hey, Jimmy, thanks for having me.
Dude, I tell you what, man, you and I have our books come out the same day, kind of fun, the process of getting that thing to finally get out. And when I came across your profile, you are doing a great job of helping people combine both the mental and physical side of health. And I've been telling people this for a long time now, is like most physical issues are not actually a physical issue. And I think you cover this really well. And your new book, Think This, Not That, it's kind of an interesting title for a doctor. But to me, it makes total sense because it's that mental game and that emotional game that's going to create a real healthy person.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is known, if you look at biblical medicine, if you look at ancient Asian medicine, they believe that more than 50% of health conditions are primarily caused by our mindset, our beliefs, our emotions. Just to give an example of this, I think this is mind-blowing. A lot of us realize this, but for instance, if we get under a lot of stress, right, and we have a lot of fear in our life, fear of failure, fear of disappointing loved ones, anything like that, this system. If you have anger and frustration about things, that's toxic to your liver. And of course, we know this, if you have a lot of anxiety, your blood pressure will raise, that affects your cardiovascular system. But the reality is that every thought you have that's negative and every positive thought you have affects our physiological system. And there's something called the placebo effect that also shows that if you believe you're going to heal, you likely will. This was discovered back during World War I when they ran out of morphine and they started giving people sugar pills, and they found that over 1/3 of the men given sugar pills had the same pain relief as morphine, which is crazy to even think about. And other things have happened, like there's something called the nocebo effect, which whereas if you believe you aren't going to heal or something bad could happen to you, it likely will. There was a case study done, a real case study, where a man went in and he was told he had liver cancer and 3 months to live, and he died 3 months later. And when they went and did the autopsy, he had a small benign tumor on the side of his liver that could have been removed, and he could have lived another 30, 40 years. So all that being said, yes, the power of our mind in terms of how it affects our physiology is very real.
Well, and I think that's one of the worries that I have about like the way that, society has gone this last couple decades, especially, but it seems like it's accelerating right now, is I don't think that, a lot of these health professionals, they're not taking into account the effects of being in community and being able to be out there with your friends and family. And we saw it in the pandemic. Like, I was screaming from the rooftops because it was like, no, this is the worst thing you can do for people from a health standpoint.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely agree. Just to give you an example of this, what people started doing was spending all this time on their phone, right? And so they're getting a hormone, a neurotransmitter called dopamine. Well, what you start missing out on, though, is serotonin. Serotonin is that at runner's high, you're out on a run or walking, just spending time outside, you're getting this other neurotransmitter, which is the most closely connected to true joy and fulfillment. And oxytocin is a hormone that you get when you hug somebody, you high five, you're eating at a close dinner or hanging out with your boys or in connecting to your spouse. And that hormone is really responsible for connection. It's meaning, it's significance, it's you feel I'm really connected to this person. And so really, we really missed out on a lot of these things hormonally. But, and here's the other thing that happened. You remember this, and this happened both on CNN on the left and Fox News on the right. You're sitting there watching the screen, and there is a ticker of how many people are dying per second or per minute, and it's just striking fear in the hearts of people. And there's an oath I took as a physician, and it's first do no harm. And most physicians are doing the opposite. I mean, when you go into most physicians, they will give you the worst case scenario. They'll tell you, and so all that being said, they're violating this oath that they took many, many years ago. But yeah, I do think that when we look at the pandemic, it made all these things worse. In fact, here's another example. When I first got into clinical practice, the conditions I most commonly saw were things like hypothyroidism, diabetes, heart disease, cancer. I mean, those were continuing to rise. But what's outpaced those, probably by tenfold over the last 5 years, has been mental health issues. people feeling depressed, anxiety, loneliness is actually probably the biggest condition. And so, yeah, these things are exploding. And this is because people lack wisdom. These doctors today, everyone from Dr. Fauci to Biden to the people who were actually running the government at the time, there was no wisdom involved at all, because wisdom really looks at trade-offs. It understands the side effects of things. And so you have you have lockdowns, and so now you have alcoholism on the rise, drug abuse, pornography, a number of things, loneliness. Sorry, I could go on a big tangent about this, but yes.
Well, it's worth saying, and I think just being aware of that is so important. I think, a lot of, unfortunately, the way that politics works is they think, all right, what's going to affect my rating today, as opposed to what's going to be best for us 6 years down the line when nobody else can see the effects of my decisions today, when I'm already out of office and everything else. And so I think that's a little bit of what happened. I think for people like yourself, I think it's important that you keep talking about these things, and that you wrote the book, because I think a lot of people, they have health issues and they don't understand that it's all happening up here. It's what's going on with their mental game and how their belief system is affecting everything else in their lives. So I would love to hear a few of kind of these main issues and topics that you speak about in your book, and why people just need to understand this information.
Yeah, well, one of the first things, and by the way, I think everyone's really going to relate to this, and it's going to impact them in a big way, because we all have limiting beliefs, and they almost all start during our childhood. And for me, I had one, and here's the crazy thing. If I would have held on to this single belief, this one wrong belief, my entire future would be different right now. Like, you and I wouldn't even be having this conversation. And so when I was in high school, freshman in high school, I had a teacher ask me to stay after class. This was freshman English class. Her name was Miss Noble, and I stayed after class. And she says, "Josh, what do you want to do after high school?" And I said, "I want to be a doctor." And she literally laughed out loud. Now, I want to jump back and say the reason I shared that was the year before my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. I saw her lose her hair. I saw her go through chemotherapy. And as a kid, I remember thinking, I never want to see anyone have to go through this again. I want to help alleviate this sort of suffering. And also, there has to be a better way. And I want to find a better way for people to heal. And so I shared with her, I want to be a doctor. Well, she laughed and she said, "Josh, my daughter has a 3.8 GPA in college, and she barely got into med school." She said, "Listen, with your GPA right now, you're getting a D- in my class. You just got an F on this paper." She said, "You'd never get into med school." She said, "I'd find something else and you need to try harder." And I walked out of that classroom, and the thing that I took away being a 14-year-old boy was, oh, I can't be a doctor now. And I also walked away with, well, I'm not smart. And so for 4 years in high school, I just stopped trying. I didn't try at all. And by the way, 2 weeks later, my mom brought me to see a physician, and he talked about me like I wasn't in the room, and he said, "Your son has severe ADHD. He's always going to have trouble learning." So then I thought to myself, well, gosh, not only am I not smart, I'm like medically not smart. There's something, I have a learning problem. There's something wrong with me. And so that was throughout high school. The only reason I graduated, and you can probably appreciate this, is my dad, I knew would kill me if I didn't graduate high school. So I at one point I got grounded for like a whole semester, but I barely graduated with a C- GPA. I did want to go to college though, so I applied to these colleges, and I got turned down by all of them except for one. And here's what they put in the letter: it was the University of Kentucky, and they said, "You're not in, basically, but if you come and take summer school, we'll let you in school." So I said, okay, well, I don't want to stay back and be the kid that doesn't go to college or does community college. And so I'm going to go and I'm going to try. And so in the first class I had, Jimmy, was English 101. Okay. And my first big project was a paper. And so I tried. I wrote this paper. I tried, turned it in. And a few days later, the teacher, her name was Miss Williams, she says, "Josh, can you stay after class?" And I thought, I go, oh no, like this is, deja vu. I probably failed. And she goes, "Hey, what's your major?" And I said, "Well, I haven't chosen a major yet." And she said, "Well, I really think you should consider being an English major or journalism major because, this paper is excellent." She said, "You got the highest grade in the class. And I can tell you could be a really talented writer." And she said, "Great job." And I walked out of that class. And for me, it was literally like having a diseased organ transplanted. I'd call it like a mindset or even a memory transplant. I had this memory and this belief about myself for years. and it kept me from even trying. And then I replaced it, and then I replaced it with this new belief, and then averaged above a 3.0 in college. I eventually went to Johns Hopkins University, graduated with a 3.9 GPA, became a doctor, just wrote my 7th book, built a business worth over $100 million a year. By the way, I don't say any of those things to boast. The reason I say all those things is that I went from a kid to barely graduating high school, C-, who didn't believe I could do anything. And because I had one person in my life tell me I was capable, I could do it, and I needed to essentially believe differently about myself, those things became a reality. And there are so many people, Jimmy, who have one belief, one single belief, one limiting belief that's keeping them from the relationship of their dreams, keeping them from their career success, writing the book, taking the risk, doing those things. And so that's really the initiative of really the first chapter of the book, really diving into. Here's exactly how you start to shatter these limiting beliefs and start adopting the beliefs of people that are the 1% that are having all these breakthroughs.
Wow. Yeah, I love that story, man. It reminds me of the story. I think it's Thomas Edison. He got kicked out of school or something. His teacher wrote a note to his mom and basically said, your kid's an idiot and he needs to be out of school. And his mom said, hey, they said that you're too smart for school. We're going to take you out and study on your own. And he found the note years later and realized what was actually on there. But, he became obviously a genius. I think it might have been Thomas Jefferson. It was Thomas somebody or another. But no, anyway, but it's true. It's like what we believe about ourselves. I think our job is leaders, as parents, as a boss, is to just instill belief in other people that they can do difficult things, that they have the abilities and the characteristics to do whatever needs to happen. And, I remember the people that first believed in me and they're like, man, you're a leader, dude. Or like, hey, man, you're going to lead people for good or bad. You should choose which lane you want to take them because people listen to you and you're persuasive. And they start saying these things and you're like, man, I am, huh? And you start to lean into those things. And next thing you know, that is who you become.
I have this, I have a men's group that I lead with 8 guys in it. And because I was so impacted by just a few, I can go back and think about just total shifts in my life. And most of them happen in a situation like that. Like someone would, like my grandfather, put his hand on my shoulder, said something to me, and it just changed the way I thought. It was almost this immediate thing that happened. And so I do this in my men's group each year as I go around and put my arm on their shoulder and say, I see this in you. Like I see in you. I see this character. I see this skill. I see this future. And I try and paint a big vision and picture for what I truly see that they're capable of and what God's called them to do. And I ask them, hey, what's the most powerful thing we've done? And we've read some incredible books. We've done some retreats. Had, amazing guests speak, those sort of things. And every one of them, when I asked, what's the most powerful thing we've done in group, they all said that. Because there's a lot of people today, and I think men in particular, who have never had anybody do that for them. By the way, that's one of the things I love about your group. When I had you on my podcast, you were sharing what you do in your group. And basically, you go through shatter limiting beliefs for the men in your group. You help them think differently and you speak into their lives. And it's what so many people are missing today. And so anyways, just to share, I just think that if you want to be a world changer and you're watching this or listening to this, do that. Do that more. Go and it's okay now. COVID's over. Put your hand on somebody's shoulder, look them in the eyes, and let them know this is who you are. And it'll change their life.
Yeah, I talked about one exercise that I just did last week. I talked about on your podcast where I just had every guy in the group had to text 5 people and say, hey, tell me one unique talent or quality that I have that maybe I don't recognize, right? And so you got people telling you all about you. And the guy said, this is one of the best exercises we've ever done. Another one I did at my last retreat is I have each guy stands up and then 3 people raise their hand and tell them something amazing about them. And so in front of the whole group, 3, everyone's raising their hands. I pick 3 for each person and they just pour into them. And, it's so rare. And I tell my friends, I have this one buddy, he's like one of my most successful friends, super good looking, supermodel wife, the dude's got it going on. And I never loved him more than one night when he was about to become a dad and he just felt inferior. He just didn't feel like he was worthy to be a dad. And he pulled me and a few other buddies aside. He said, I just need you guys to tell me that I can do this, that I'm worthy to be a dad and all this. And we're pouring into him, and I've never loved him more than that moment. But he had to ask for it. It's right in the Bible. Jesus says, "Ask and you shall receive." Like, if I just tell everybody, I'm like, hey, ask people in your world, text them all the time. Hey, can you tell me what you love about me? Can you tell me something good today? Like, don't be ashamed to do that, And if you have people in your life that love you, you can trust that they'll take it the right way and they'll pour back into you. And I think that because those words of affirmation, just being able to hear from other people what makes us amazing, we'll give everyone else so much credit, but we're very, very difficult on ourselves. And we very rarely will give ourselves as much credit as we'll give a total stranger.
It's so true. I think there's this attraction that I have, and I know you have too, to humility and also confidence. I think they're both important. I mean, you want to have a balance of both. But I think this is one of the things that, you can't grow without humility, because the opposite's pride, and you know it all already. So you can't even change it all. But I do think there's an element there of confidence too. Another thing, the first person I ever had, and I get into this book a little bit as well, but the first person I had really do that to me was my grandfather. And I was really blessed to have great parents, all four of my grandparents. But I had a grandfather who, and by the way, this is again something I love about what you're doing and why I reached out about us connecting is that, most people today have not defined success correctly. I think that if you want to, when you look at a hero's journey and looking at it's so important that all of us want something in life. And most of the time we have sort of, again, this goes back to childhood. And some of it's the way we're wired, but we either want recognition or fame or money. But really all those things, almost all of them still go back to being, I want to be seen. Mm-hmm. And that's why part of the reason that exercise is so powerful. But one of the things I realized is something that I wanted is I just wanted to have an impact with my life. I wanted to live a life that was significant and extraordinary. And I remember years ago being at my grandfather's funeral, and I had an amazing grandfather. My grandfather was a World War II veteran, served in the Navy. And when he was 40 years old, he worked for this company called Bell Telephone, working fixing power lines, very, very blue collar work. And he just realized to himself, this is not what I want to do the rest of my life. And so he was talking to my grandmother, and then he shared his dream of what he wanted to really create community. And so him and my grandmother, they saw this ad in a newspaper for this pond that was for sale, and this 50 acres. So they lived in Lime, Ohio, or just south of Lime, Ohio, and they went and they took their life savings and bought this pond. They built out a campground, turned it into a swim park. And so as a kid, it was like a dream world for me, going up there, having a blast. But my grandfather was really, he brought people together, and he used this as a ministry. Like, he would go back in this campground, he would pray for people, he would let half of them were staying for free because that's just how he was. Anything he could do to serve somebody. But I was at his funeral, and we were at the point in the funeral where the pastor asks everyone, he said, does anyone have any final words about Howard before we lay him to rest? And a man immediately next to me cries out, and just in tears, sobbing, he said, Howard was my best friend. And I remember, and I'm a little ashamed to say this, my first reaction was not empathy or compassion. It was
jealousy.
Well, no, actually it was this. It was, you're not my grandfather's best friend. That's like my Uncle Alan over here. And then that's the first thing that crossed my mind. Yeah. But then a second later, I thought, you know what? I'm sure my grandfather was your best friend. Mm-hmm. Because when you looked at this room of people, you could have looked around and probably, this isn't over exaggeration, 30, 40%. If you would have asked them, who's your best friend? They would have said, Howard. Like, that's what they would have said. And I think it caused me to pause and redefine success, because at the time I was opening my practice, or I was my first few years of practice. I was finally, I was making money. I was writing my first book. And so I think I was defining success for myself more about what I was accomplishing and achieving. And I remember a lot of this was sort of like things flashing through my head. I also thought about when I was in college, I was on the triathlon team at University of Kentucky. And I was a cyclist as well. And so I loved that sport. And so I was a big Lance Armstrong fan. And so when he got caught doping, I felt really betrayed. The other thing was, like, my mom had cancer, so I was very much against fighting, helping with cancer. And then he had started this nonprofit. So for me, Lance Armstrong was, the perfect human, like this person. And then I remember reading his book and seeing his interviews and him just saying, you know what, like, my mindset is win at all costs. cost me my family, cost me character, cost this. It was win at all costs. And I realized I want to make sure that I don't have that same mentality, that everything's about an accomplishment and I'll sacrifice all the things along the way. Steve Jobs, when he was dying, after his cancer diagnosis, he told the person writing his memoir, his biography, he said, you know what? I did not have a good relationship with my children. He said, I want them to know why, but I sacrificed them for Apple. And so it made me realize, like, I don't want to, gain the world and lose my soul. And so I think I became much more aware of this is what success is. My grandfather was never on Forbes, never had 100 million Instagram followers, none of that stuff. But like success is who you become. But I just realized that I need to go from an accomplishing mindset to a becoming mindset and focusing more on who I become. I had a to-do list every day. I needed to have a to-be list. More wise, more generous, a better leader, be more conscious on being that person. And so for me, that's been so impactful for my life since then, of thinking about, by the way, I don't know if you grew up in church or not, but when I was in youth group, we were given these, I bought this bracelet and it said WWJD, like what would Jesus do? But it's very much that mindset. Like now, rather than thinking about what can I accomplish, I try and think about when I'm in different situations, what would Jesus do? Or what would Howard do? Or if I'm on an airplane and there's a crying baby, what would Mother Teresa do? Or if I'm out there fighting for something I believe in, what would Martin Luther King Jr. do? But really embracing more of that becoming mentality.
Well, I had an interesting conversation with Chris Williamson when he came and spoke to my group recently, and about this very thing. And it there's also the quote, that Tony Robbins, it's probably his most famous quote, but he says, success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. That one hits. Like the last thing you want to be is successful and stressed and just not fulfilled. Like there's nothing worse in life, right? But Chris was saying, he said, one of the issues we have as society today, and it's kind of like what you were just saying, Josh, is the metrics of which people tend to look at success are the ones you can see. It's like the money you have, or the followers you have, or the clicks you have, and all these different things. But those aren't the things that actually bring us happiness. And so it's not the things that are true success. And so a lot of people have started sacrificing their things that actually bring them happiness and fulfillment, the things that would be success, for the things that we can see or the things that we can measure. And so there's a caution in there to not fall for the trap of, giving up the things that truly make us happy, or the things that would make us a success, like your grandfather, for the things that, people can see, the amount of money we have, or the vehicle we have, or things like that.
Well, and I think society is highlighting, it's been less and less people that are truly virtuous. I mean, anybody that has any level of character, we try and shame them or discredit them. I mean, Tim Tebow is a great example of this, I think. I mean, there's probably others, but talk about somebody who is so loving and giving and generous and embodies, this sort of masculinity in a way, though, that's just laying down his life for other people. And so the media is like, well, how can we cancel him? I mean, they've been trying to cancel him for 15 years, 20 years. It's wild.
He's a real deal too. A couple things about Tim, because you're so right. Like they want to tear him down so bad. In fact, I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro with a bunch of the guys that played on the Eagles, and Tebow was with them for a while. And one of the guys was telling a story where, anyway, it's a funny story, but it basically wanted to figure out if Tim Tebow really was a virgin or whatever else. And they had this whole philosophy, and he tells this story, and he's like, dude, that dude is the realest dude of all time. And but I had a chance to speak with him about a year and a half ago, and we were in the green room, and somebody mentioned my tattoo, which is we or the they, and he's like, what does that mean? So I started telling him the story, and we start talking. He's asking me questions for 10 minutes, and I've never felt somebody so present with me in my life. Like he was so, they finally were like, Tim, you got to go. You're giving your speech. He's like, yeah, one more minute. And we were just sitting there talking, and I got his number. He gave me a cell number. I've only texted him 4 or 5 times in the last year and a half, but he hits me back right away. I mean, the dude is as real as they come in every single way. And so you're right, though, like somebody like that, they just can't get, because he truly is living it. I mean, the way that he lives his life, the way that he lives his marriage, the way that his charity, we do it every year, the Night to Shine event, where we do the special prom for kids with special needs. And that is a great example. And, unfortunately, the society is highlighting all of the wrong things. It really is. And I actually had this thought of myself. I'm like, I need to be a little bit more careful of what I'm highlighting, even of what I'm doing, because a lot of times, people can take the wrong message. They can see some of these things I'm doing, and the thing that makes my life beautiful, the best parts of my life, are the parts that maybe I wasn't highlighting all the time. And so I said, oh, I need to make a little bit of a shift in how and I've been doing this for the last few years now, but like showing the parts of my life that really bring me happiness and really bring me fulfillment. It's not the partying and the traveling and all that stuff. It really wasn't. I mean, that stuff's fun, but it was, the connecting and helping, serve other people and doing things that really do bring you fulfillment. And so I said, there's a lot of people watching me that might be confused on what's going to make them happy. And I wanted to make sure I didn't put out a false message to them, because society tends to, it still works. Like, people put their Lambo on Instagram and it gets the most views. Ty Lopez was talking about this the other day. He goes, look, I don't want to put out these cheesy videos, but every time I put a Lambo in the video, it does 10 times better. What do you want me to do?
Yeah.
It's just society does that.
It's true. It's true. And I think you and I share this. And even as we talked about these men's groups, I also have a mastermind group, and it's for health professionals. And so we got a lot of, doctors and coaches and things like that in there. And when I'm there, everything I teach is becoming. That's the sort of message is, here's how you become, pointing to people on how to become. And yeah, if you want to live the best life possible, again, this is the way that, when you look at the Bible really teaches discipleship. It's not saying achieve what a Jesus achieved or achieve what this saint did or this. It's like follow in the footsteps of your rabbi, follow the saints, lay your life, live the sort of life that they lived. And so that's sort of the ancient way when you look at the biblical model of becoming the best you. And the other thing is, when you become the best you, the accomplishments will come, right? Those sort of things will just naturally flow from that. And so I think that's an important concept, I think, that people understand. But even as you shared on my podcast about, it's helping men become, not accomplish.
Yeah. Yeah, there's, anybody that's accomplished something great, how fleeting it is. And if it's not about the thing, and I even say, I do a goal setting thing every year. I say, look, the only reason to set goals, just so you guys are aware of this, it's not to achieve the goal. It's who you will have to become to achieve that goal.
That's right.
And if you miss that, because one person said, I just don't like to set goals because it feels like I'm getting let down. It feels like I'm not holding up to my bargains. It feels like I'm not doing what I said I was going to do. And I don't like feeling the shame of it. And she heard me explain. I said, no, it's like, it's a percentage. It's like, look, did you become better because you had these goals? It doesn't matter if you hit the damn goal. If you were striving to hit those goals, you became a much better version of you. And if you only did 60% of it, that's better than if you did 0% of it. And if you can look at the goal that way, it's not a failure if you don't achieve it, but in the pursuit of it, you became better. Then all of a sudden, it just changes their whole attitude about what that is.
Well, 100%. And that's very much, if you look at Carol Dweck, she wrote a book called Mindset. She's a Stanford psychologist. It's very much the growth mindset, not worrying less about hitting the impressing people with the way you hit the goal, and it's more about who you become in hitting the goal, right? Or if you even hit it, it's sort of like, it's not whether you win or lose, but how you play the game that counts. Not to say you don't want to try and win, we all should, but another thing I think it's really important that we sort of pair up with goals is self-awareness. I think awareness is where we are, and goals are where we want to go if we're talking about becoming. There's a study that I think is the coolest name of a study of all time. It's called the Batman study. And they did this on kids, and they took kids and they put them in 3 groups. And basically the goal was to have these kids, they gave them a project to do. And they said, hey, when you're done and you've given your best effort on this project, then we want you can play video games or whatever in the room. This was on 6 and 8-year-olds. So they had the first group of kids go in and they said, okay, we want you to go in and work on this project. Okay, they did it, and then they went and played afterwards. The second group, before they went in, though, they said, okay, we want you to do something, and they had them practice what they called in this study self-distancing, stepping outside of themselves and having a level of self-awareness about who you are, and that, hey, Johnny, that you're giving it your all. They went in and did that. They saw a 13% increase in productivity from these kids just by them being more self-aware. Then what they did was they told these kids, they said, hey, you're not you. Pick your favorite character, superhero, whoever it is, and be them as you do this project. And so one girl's like, I'm Princess Jasmine or Dora the Explorer. And one of the boys, of course, is like, I am Batman. And they go in to do this study, and it was another 13 to 16% on top of that in terms of the results they saw. I think it's so powerful because this self-awareness is tied into you and something you and I talked about on my podcast to start, which is identity, because that feeds everything else. And so think about it. If these kids believed that they were even better than what they thought they were themselves, they thought they were Batman, they did way more. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, it's brilliant. Again, like anytime I feel like there's a famous talk by Matthew McConaughey where he's basically chasing the future version of himself, but it kind of reminds me of like, I tell people like, if you want to improve your life drastically, get super clear on who you want to be. So like your Batman could just be your highest version of yourself, right?
Yeah.
And then act as if you're that person. And the gap's probably huge when you start versus who you want to be, your ideal self versus your actual self. But over time, as you like pretend to be that person, you're going to become more of that person. And pretty soon that's who you are, or a much closer version to that. And then, it'll just extend again and you'll keep improving your life. But I think it's brilliant because it's so true. Like we are going to act like the person that we think that we are. Like if you wake up and somebody says, man, you look tired, you look depressed, you're like, oh, I'm probably a little bit down. But if somebody's like, dude, love your energy today, like the last thing you're going to do is be like slacking afterwards, and if you want people to improve what they're doing, you don't tell them what they're not doing. You highlight any time they do any kind of improvement. You give them any kind of like, you know what, man, I really love the way that you show up when I've got people, you start telling them that, because then they go, oh, I want to be that way every time. And so by acting like Batman or your highest version of yourself, of course, that as soon as you told me that, I was like, brilliant. I guarantee those results are going to be off the chart. I already knew what the result was going to be.
Yes, exactly. And I think this identity piece is so important today because I mean, when I look at some of the biggest issues of today, a lot of them are identity issues. I'm going to share something with you, and you may or may not be surprised. I was actually surprised that it's gotten this bad. I had a friend visiting me from Pittsburgh, and I was in Nashville. And he said to me, hey, we're thinking about moving here to Nashville. And I said, I was excited. I'm like, great. He's a really great guy. And I said, well, why is that? Well, he said, well, because our kids' school just installed litter boxes in the kids' bathrooms because the kids believe that they're cats. And the thing that I think that if I would really let this penetrate me, I might just cry thinking about it. And the reason is kids today, their identities are so weak, they believe that they're subhuman. They believe they're less than human. And there are actually also people out there even worse than that, where we see a lot of these globalists that actually believe people are viruses or parasites, even less than animals. And so all that being said, we have a major, major identity crisis today. And I think that's at the root of almost all this. And our identity is what feeds our purpose. Our purpose is what feeds our beliefs and then our actions. And so if you don't get to the root there, identity, everything else then from that, if people don't have the right identity, everything else falls apart.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned that. I mean, somebody needs to smack the shit out of those parents first, but then the kids that are acting like cats, right?
Yeah.
It's like we can't just allow people to play this make-believe world. Like there's literally kids that haven't spoken besides meowing or barking in like years. Like that's what they really are, like changing their entire identity. I love the way you put that though, that it's less than subhuman. It's like, wow, never thought of it that way. You're not just being a cat, you're being less than a human, and to allow that behavior, it's just a mental illness. And sometimes we have to just call it what it is. It's a mental illness. And literally somebody just needs to be like, knock your shit off, and just step up. There needs to be an adult in the room.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is something that I know you and I share in common in terms of the importance of this sort of purpose and identity being connected to God or the divine. A lot of people think that they determine their own identity. It's only connected to self, but our identity is connected to our community. That's one thing. So like our identity is connected to our community, and it's sort of like an anchor. Like our identity is really like we need to be grounded or it's tied to other things. If you think about like a Martin Luther King Jr., who is his identity? Well, he was a black man from lived in Alabama. He was a husband. He was a father. He was a pastor. He was a civil rights leader. So he has all of these different things that sort of reinforce his identity and who he is. But the most powerful way to really boost your identity or create the strongest identity is to connect yourself to the most unchanging, powerful thing possible, which is God or the divine. Like if somebody is not tied into God, I just want to kind of show, I think, the repercussions here. If somebody is not living with understanding their own identity and that I am a divine being made in the image of God that's going to live for eternity, and every single thing I do has eternal impact. And so if my role, by the way, roles are connected to other people, and then it's your roles and responsibilities in life. So for instance, my role as a father, if I have an identity as a father, let's say it's very weak. And my role as a father could just be I impregnate a woman. I'm done. That's it, right? So if there's not much level of meaning or significance tied to your identity, then that's all you're going to do, and you're just not going to show up to things because it doesn't matter what I do beyond that. And then a level up from that could be a father saying, I'm going to provide for my family. I'm going to show up. Well, that's a massive, massive step up. But then there's levels beyond that of saying, you know what? I'm a divine being. I'm made in the image of God. I have divine beings that I've fathered that are made in the image of God. They're going to live for eternity. And I'm impacting not only them, but their kids and their kids and their kids and future generations. And so thinking my goal as a father is to help my kids create the greatest relationship with God as possible. I'm also going to help them grow in character to the maximum level. I'm going to help them find their unique gifts and skills that only they have in the world and pour my heart and soul and sacrifice everything to help them become the best they can be. And there's just such a difference there, right? I think a lot of people today are feeling a sense of emptiness, which I felt in my life. I mean, when I was not connected to God, I'm thinking back when I was in college, I just felt empty. I just felt like I wasn't motivated. I just lacked purpose in life. And when I was really able to tap into, this is who I am, so this is my purpose, and everything I do has eternal significance, then it became motivating. It's energizing. It changed my life.
Well, and it also gives you confidence. I know for me, I every single day, just knowing that I have a purpose that I think God is behind, that I know God is behind, when I feel like I should make a choice, I make it. I don't question it. I'm like, I'm being guided. I'm being walked, to this thing, and it keeps working. I know that God is behind what I'm doing. He's helping me. And so it gives me a confidence to every single day. I know that my life matters. I know that it has purpose. I know that it's making a difference. And so I'm motivated to do it. I'm excited to do it. And, I'm like, okay, this isn't work. This is what I've been called to do. And that's a different energy. It's a different identity that you show up with in every single thing that you're doing.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Well, one thing I want to talk to you about being a doctor, I think that we have this problem. I talk about this in my book a little bit, but I think we have a problem with society where we're all trying to feel better. And I think that the goal should be to try to feel more. I think if we could quit trying to numb with alcohol and social media and whatever it might be, right? Just all the different vices that people use, or honestly, even work and sports, some things that aren't necessarily bad in and of itself, but it's masking from us to, being with ourselves and being able to feel more. I think that you said this earlier, we have such a busy society. We have such a busy world that we live in now. I think it makes it hard for people to feel what's really going on within themselves. And so maybe speak a little bit to the issues or the dangers of, overstimulating ourselves with dopamine and not sitting with our feelings enough.
Yeah. This is a great question, by the way. It is an epidemic that everybody's guided by something, right? Some people are guided by feelings. Some people are guided by rational thoughts. Some people are guided by just dopamine or hormonal hits. And so, when we're living in a society where we have things that are sort of constantly stimulating us, we never really get to pause and reflect and actually think. I mean, there are some quotes there's a quote by Carl Jung, a famed psychologist, and he says, thinking is hard, that's why people don't do it. Jordan Peterson also points this out, is that most people, a lot of people will go through their entire day and never truly think. They'll just be led by their sort of raw animalistic emotions, just whatever is sort of leading them subconsciously. They just let and until their life is gone. And so we know that the amount of time people are spending, by the way, I just saw this study on Gen Z. Guess how many hours a day the average Gen Z spends on social media?
I know it's high, like crazy high, like 6 hours or something like that.
7, yes.
It's gone up. It used to be 6.
I mean, if that's crazy. And so if somebody is living on social media, and mostly, and TikTok is for that age group, the number one channel, and you're just scrolling, I mean, they're living on a slot machine in a way for 7 hours a day. Think about what else they could do with 7 hours of their life, what the sort of greatness, the life that they've wasted. So all that being said, yeah, what a lot of people do today is they'll just numb out. They'll numb out on social media, and they'll use that to deal with pain. They'll use it to pass the time, and what happens is that's all dopamine hits. It's all dopamine, which really is stimulating one area of your brain. I really, and there are studies, of course, on this on young girls. I think it was around nearly 40% of girls in high school have low self-esteem, and the greatest factor is due to their time on social media. Instagram was a specific channel that it was referring to in the study. But we know that's think about this. If we would, if somebody got a report in front of them that there was something today that people were eating, here's an example, or that they were doing that showed that it was causing increased rates of suicide and depression and all these things, like statistically by that much, we might outlaw, because it's social media, kind of gets now sugar might actually be pretty high up there too. But my point is that these, this is the reality of how dangerous it is. And the other thing is we're replacing it with something else. So we should always have a balance in our life. Dopamine we need, okay? It's important for mood enhancement, overcoming depression, anxiety. We also need serotonin. Serotonin is the hormone you get, what we call a runner's high. But if you're also walking, spending time outdoors, you're getting serotonin. That's connected a lot more to a sense of sort of joy and happiness and fulfillment. Like you're proud of yourself. Like I just did a good workout. That's going to be more of that serotonin. And the other one is oxytocin, where it's, hey, we're connected with each other. And we're missing that today as well, in terms of, hugging and high-fiving and all those things. And so we're missing that. And that affects our health. I mean, these hormones are important for longevity. And so I do agree that most people are pursuing just feeling better rather than feeling fulfilled. And that's the difference between, if you're saying, I'm going to eat right now to feel better. Well, to feel better in the immediate, you're going to do a cheeseburger or sugar or French fries, because that's going to bring that, versus if you're saying, I'm eating to live, I'm eating because I have purpose, or I'm eating due to my identity of being, I'm going to be a fit person that's going to be, healing and helping people for years. You're going to eat differently. You're going to eat more for fulfillment. So there's a huge difference.
Yeah. Well, it's just one of those things that, you're almost to 1 million followers on Instagram now, and I'm approaching 500,000 on TikTok, and it is one of those things that I try to lure people into my page so that I can teach them principles, so I can at least give them something positive. I'm like, if they're going to be here, let's at least teach them something good, kind of thing. And so I feel like I'm trying to help. But even then, I have to watch myself. I've noticed, is when I'm feeling the best is when I'm not attached to what's going on in, with my phone, and I'm not watching, sports or TV or things like that. When I really get calm and I can just relax and let my nervous system settle. As a doctor, do you know how long it takes you to unwire some of this stuff? Like if you're just if you're addicted to all that stuff, how long do you have to sit without that stuff and really to reset? Is it easy to rebalance, or is it very difficult?
You know what? It's not. First off, I do think it can be difficult, but it is almost identical to any sort of drug addiction or sugar or caffeine addiction. There are 3 days of withdrawal symptoms. And listen, it could be as bad as somebody might have headaches or might just feel depressed for 3 days.
Yeah, but it is about, they'll feel disconnected maybe, right? Or like they're...
Exactly. And that could be about 3 days or so. But really beyond that, once you get away from it enough, people are set free enough to become more self-aware and realize, what it's been doing to them. And so, I think it's about 3 to 4 days for most people. Now, in terms of it creating a habit and making it solid of not going on every minute onto your phone, it's about 59 days on average. But in terms of just generally speaking, I think most people can see a breakthrough within 3 days.
That's good to hear, because I thought it would be more than that. So the 59 days, they say that's how long it takes to really get out of the habit of just being on your phone all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating. Well, this has been such a fun conversation, Josh. For people that want to learn more, they want to get your new book, where is the best place to send them to?
Yeah, people can go. The book is called Think This, Not That. It's in bookstores nationwide. It's on Amazon.com. If you go on Amazon or Barnes and Noble and buy the book, you can also go to joshax.com, and I've put together a mindset masterclass, put together a free workbook, and a lot of other free bonuses of experts teaching, guys like Dave Ramsey and others. You'll get his free bonuses on there. So if you just go buy it, put in the code on joshax.com. You'll get that as well. I've got a podcast, which I had you as a guest on. You can check out the Dr. Josh Axe Show and check out the one I did with Jimmy. And that was on, I'm on all platforms, but you can also watch the video on YouTube or listen on iTunes. And then my handle on socials at Dr. Josh Axe. And I put out a blend of a lot of health content, but also a lot of this psychology, growth, mindset content as well. And Jimmy, thanks so much for having me on. Again, I'm a huge fan of you and all the stuff you're doing. So thanks again.
Yeah, no, likewise, man. I look forward to connecting again soon. And yeah, just keep doing great things, man. I appreciate you.
Thank you.